like I said in that quote, like baseball is full of, you know, patterns, and like guys tend to do the same thing every day. And then you'll see them kind of have their just little habits. And I think those are little micro meditations, even though they don't really necessarily know it.
All right, welcome everybody. My name is Scott Haase with Indiana Twins, and we are joined today by Steph Armijo. And before I get into a little bit about her background, I want to just kind of run through our normal agenda of things. So if you are not following us on social media or on the YouTubes, make sure you just kind of look up at any of those. It's just at Indiana Twins, trying to keep it simple for everyone. On YouTube, it's just youtube.com/Indiana Twins. And then if you have any questions or want to reach out to us, it'll probably be me. If you want to email us, it's indianatwins@gmail.com. Again, it's pretty simple. And we are good over here. Other things. I did want to give a shout out to Reynolds Farm Equipment in Mooresville. So right now with our organization not having any teams playing on our fields, our sponsors are not getting any love on the signs on those fences, so I wanted to give them a shout out. I think the last one, I think we've covered them all, so that's good. All right, with that said, this is episode 17. We're rolling along. I'm excited to get into our conversation with Steph. So Steph, if you want to kick it off and tell everyone a little bit about your baseball background, you can go back as far as you want. I know it dates back pretty far, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, so I've been in and around the game of baseball for quite some time. Grew up a big baseball fan, probably starting at around age 8. I used to watch baseball on TV. I was a big TBS kid, so I was a Braves fan. My brothers started playing in Little League a little bit after that. They're younger than I am. And I became their very unofficial OS because I learned how to keep score. So I would keep box scores at their Little League games, and then I would watch the games at 7 p.m. on TBS every night and keep box scores of those games. And then after the game was over the next day, I would take the newspaper clippings of the box scores that they used to do, and I would match things up and make sure that I got everything right. So I was definitely enamored with the game of baseball and stats at a pretty young age. Went to Arizona State for college. I chose to go to ASU because there's so much baseball in Arizona. I worked for the Arizona Fall League, the San Francisco Giants, and from there I got a job at MLB.com working in statistics. Did that for a bit before I made a little switch over to the yoga industry.
Great. So actually, I want to talk about keeping stats, because I actually, truth be told, there's no reason to lie about it, I have never taken a complete game box, or not box score, but like book. Because every time I've tried to dabble, how long did it take you to learn how to take a complete book? Because there's just so many nuances and things that you might not see your entire life. And then how do I score that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the biggest advantages to learning the game through TV. As a kid, I only got to go to one pro baseball game. That was a Marlins game at Pro Player Stadium when they were playing the Braves a long time ago. But because it was on TV, I got to learn about the rules. And I think that was really important. If I was there live, first of all, I don't think that I would have kept the interest. You know, it's hard to keep a box score at a baseball game live. But when they're telling you why a balk was a balk and they're showing you how to score it, you know, you kind of start to understand the game a bit better. So I think that foundation definitely helped me.
Did you have a favorite commentator or someone that you saw on TV that you really learned a lot from, or just kind of liked their style or anything?
Not specific. I mean, I only watched Braves games. Like, you know, WGN was obviously available too, and I did not like watching any of those games. So I just loved the Braves guys. So,
yep.
Yeah.
Well, that makes sense. Yeah. All right. So tell me a little bit more about the transition, and tell everyone about the transition, how you went from loving baseball, wanting to get into stats, and then all of a sudden now you're in yoga. What in the world happened in the middle there?
Yeah, so I was working in stats, and I took my first yoga class, and you know, it was one of those moments that you hear people have. You know, it's like, I was like, why aren't baseball players doing yoga? And you know, for the past 20 years, at least they have been doing yoga to some degree. I think every team has at least dabbled in it. But I became really interested in the idea of doing like the full season travel with the team yoga experience, not just here's a little yoga during spring training, which is nice and it's great. And if that's the offering, if that's all you can get, like, you know, that's valuable. But what if you had someone travel year round with the team and be there on the plane rides, and you land in city X at 3 a.m, and 20 minutes before you land, you do some deep breathing exercises so that when these guys get to the hotel, they can go to sleep quicker so that they can be at least a little bit more ready to play the next day. You know, giving pitchers through the rotation just the opportunity to have some recovery time. You know, the baseball players are doing yoga on the field. You know, you see the pregame stretches, everybody's doing lizard pose, everybody's doing a low lunge twist and a pigeon pose. But yoga as a whole is so much more than just the yoga poses. So.
Yeah, definitely. I would completely agree. When were you first introduced to yoga? Because I've seen you talk about it a little bit and I've seen you write about it a little bit, but tell me more about when you were introduced to it.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was introduced to yoga in college. I had read books in high school, but I had taken my first classes in college. And then it wasn't until I started working at MLB, I took like a beginner series. So I like became a student at a yoga studio, and I just kind of understood what yoga really was. Because the other thing about yoga is it's just this huge umbrella, you know, it's so many different things to different people. And I love that it can be that many different things, but it also is confusing if you're just starting out and you're not sure, or you just have this idea that it's going to be this one specific thing.
Yep. I want to dive for like just a quick second into how overwhelming it can be, and then transition into how it doesn't have to be that overwhelming. So I know there are different, like, I don't know what you would call them, sectors of yoga or teachings. Like, how many different forms of yoga are out there?
There are many different styles of yoga. I think there's probably around 20. And then within that, you know, some of them are very strict. So they say like, we're going to do these yoga poses here. And so this group of yogis only practice these types of yoga poses. And then there's kind of like more free-form stuff where it might not be exactly a yoga pose, but it's kind of a stretch. And then teachers kind of add their own flair, add their own sequencing, their own creativity to it. So, you know, when you say yoga, I think you really need to get clear on what yoga is. It can be this spiritual thing where you're chanting and you're oming and you're seated most of the time. It can be a power yoga class. It can be hot yoga. It can be very alignment based. So yeah, there's lots of different types of yoga. Yeah,
it's easy to see why people can get overwhelmed. So let's do the opposite of overwhelm. Let's calm them down. Let's a little bit of breathing and relaxation with yoga. So how can yoga be simplified, and then more specifically into baseball, to where it's just not overwhelming and it's something that people can relate to? Because like you said, you're already doing it. Most of them are already doing it.
Yeah, I think that for someone that has never done yoga, you would be surprised that you're familiar with at least most of the yoga shapes. And, you know, any shape can be done, well, not any shape, but most of the shapes can be done supine. You can do a version of it standing. You can do a version of it on your belly. So there are different ways to kind of have the same shape in your body. Yeah, and it doesn't need to be complicated. I mean, a yoga sequence or a yoga class could just be as simple as doing 10 stretches a day, you know, so it doesn't need to be this big time. I mean, even with the time commitments, some yoga classes are 90 minutes and it's just, you know, it's very intense. Whereas I tend to believe that you can get the benefits of yoga just from doing some simple stretches, even at home, even on your own. And it doesn't need to be a big time commitment at all.
Yeah. How do the players react at first? Like, and I'm sure it's evolved how you introduce it to them or how you communicate, but what's their first reaction like?
It depends. I mean, the younger players have typically had some sort of exposure to yoga by the time they get to the major league or the minor league level, whether they've done it in high school, college, something, or they know someone that at least does yoga. You know, I found that the most resistance tends to be from the guys that already are established and they have their routines and they don't necessarily want to change up what they're doing. And I totally respect that. I don't think that yoga is going to land for everybody. But I do think it's an important tool to have in your toolkit if you do need it sometime.
Would you say it's probably the same with players as it is with just general population?
Yeah, I've also found that players do like to have that downtime knowing that they don't have to be on, you know, because there is a lot of stress in performing, and even in practices they're being watched, and it's nice to be able to know that you can go into something for 30, 45 minutes and just have that time for yourself, where you're not expected to be performing at, superstar level.
Yep. So I just thought of two more questions. I want to get to one, and then we'll go right back to it. But getting to work in, whether it's professional baseball or other professional sports, and I'm sure you've been around a lot of cool things, places, people, has there been a moment where you just kind of stepped back and was like, this is just really cool?
Yeah, I've had lots of those moments. I got to teach a yoga class down on the field at Citi Field, which was just, all of my dreams come true. Someone that has worked in baseball, I worked in, like I said, the Arizona Fall League, the Giants. I had only been down on the field a handful of times. And, even leading up to yoga day, we were going to do yoga down in the field. We had to have several meetings with the grounds crews to make sure that, everything was going to be fine, and we were going to take care of the grass and timing it with the game. And I wanted to go down to the field before and just take some promotion pictures. And they were like, no, you can't go down on the field. It was just like one person without her shoes on, just like wanting to take some pictures. So it's like, I so respect the work that they do. But to be able to, that Saturday morning, I just walked into Citi Field and I took my shoes off and I walked down onto the field, and it was just the best feeling in the world. The sun was shining and I was getting ready to share what I love at a place that I love. So it was absolutely one of the coolest experiences of my life.
Yeah. So the other question was, I don't know if you know who Alan Jaeger is, but he's in the baseball world. He's kind of everyone's non-traditional baseball guru of sorts, because he's big into long toss is his main thing. But if you listen to him at any length or read any of his material at any length, you find out that he is big into yoga and breathing and all kinds of things. So I was at a conference a few years back where he had a group of probably, I don't know, I'd say it was maybe like 80 coaches from, at the time I was probably in my mid-20s, maybe late 20s. So we had coaches in their 60s and 70s. And he had all of us, if there was room in this little area in this hotel in the conference room, lie down on our backs, or if we had to, just sit down, close our eyes. And he took us through just a basic breathing session or technique, and just for a few minutes, and kind of a little bit of meditation, and just brought us through that. And afterwards, when we kind of all, opened our eyes back up and discussed a little bit, he asked for any feedback. And there was a gentleman in the room that had said, I think he was about in his 60s, that in his entire life, he had never stopped just going to stop and just think and not think about anything. Because it was either to clear your mind completely or to just focus on one thing. And he, kind of brought us through that. So he said it was one of the most profound moments in his life. And everyone was just like blown away. Have you ever had anything similar to or equivalent to, or where players or people that you work with that are just like, I had no clue, and they're just kind of overwhelmed or just surprised by it?
Yeah. And I love that. Everyone's going to have a little bit of a different experience. And sometimes it's right away. It's like, holy cow, like that was amazing, and then some days it's like, see me a couple days later, like I've never slept that well in my life. Just like get some really good rest after you've done yoga. And sometimes, and sometimes you don't know, sometimes people share. And it's great to hear those stories. But yeah, yoga has many effects on the body, on the nervous system. And it's really special to be able to share that with people and show them how to tap into that a little bit.
So if we have an 11-year-old who's just about to be, too cool for everybody else, he's about to get into puberty and just be cooler than all his buddies, and, he's the top dog in one of our, let's say, our practice, and I show him a video of Steph who's about ready to lead yoga and say, hey, everybody, when he's yoga, and he's, what was it? How do kids react? Yeah,
kids can be a tougher sell. It kind of depends. I mean, you have to meet people where they're at. Like if he wants to do a little more strength stuff, there's plenty of stuff in yoga that you can build strength and concentration. There's ways to fit in the breathing and the mindfulness tidbits in yoga within the practice. So I think you really have to see who you're dealing with and see where they're at and how open they are to the experience. And then you can kind of cater the situation to them.
No, that's a really, really important key for any type of coaching, to meet people where they are. So I'm glad you said that. So I'm trying to think. How would you if I were, let's say I were to have I'm thinking of our president right now, my buddy Jason, as I'm sure watching this, he's got an 11U team. If I were to use him as a guinea pig and have their team watch or partake in one of your classes or have you do one, is that something where you would like fill out a questionnaire, talk with us? What are the things that we would need to give you to be able to help you work with those 11-year-olds?
Yeah, definitely. Environment's, a big piece of it. It's like, can you keep these guys' attention like in a quiet space? I think that's very important to set the tone of what the yoga session is going to be, and then definitely questions about that. But I also think it's important to lay out the expectations for the kids. Like, for instance, in yoga, you typically don't speak during yoga class, and that's not something that unless you've been to a yoga class. It's like shoes off. Guys generally don't take their socks off, but it's shoes and socks off. So there's just like all these little things where I think if you're going into something brand new, it's nice to give these guys kind of an overview. Like, what does namaste mean? Why do you say namaste at the end of yoga class? Are there injuries? How old? Has anyone done yoga before? Yeah, lots of important questions to find out who you're working with.
Yep. Okay, I want to read this is kind of a lengthy quote, but I think it gives some good context and leads into my next question about how to incorporate it. So this is from you. I think it's from your website. It says, baseball is a game filled with routines, superstitions, and unspoken norms. Resisting big change, baseball is the last professional sport to use yoga as part of their strength and conditioning programs. Small steps have been made over the years, but a serious look needs to be given to recovery and the nervous system. Recovery is beginning to gain attention as a critical element of training, which I would completely agree. The nervous system affects every system in the body. If players are not taking proper care of themselves from the inside, their bodies will not hold up through a 6-month season. And for a lot of, whether it's travel baseball or people taking lessons or anything, that's applicable to pretty much all ages at this point. So can you first, before we get into how it's integrated into baseball, just talk about the nervous system? Because you'll hear coaches or doctors or people talk about the nervous system, but is there a really good way that you're able to teach or educate or explain the nervous system and how it works to youth athletes?
That's a good question. So throughout the yoga practice or the experience, I try to tell them why they're doing the poses as much as possible and what the poses do. So for instance, in child's pose, you can roll your forehead on the mat, and that helps to stimulate your vagus nerve, which helps to calm your nervous system. Your nervous system is everything that's going on inside of you. And I think it's worth explaining and worth noting that, breathing and meditation and yoga, you can help to downregulate, so you can help to calm your physiological responses in your nervous system through some breathing techniques, and even just the simple act of closing your eyes while you're doing something. So for a youth athlete that doesn't meditate, and then we want to go through a meditation, I would take them through a very short meditation, but I would first goal of just having them sit there with their eyes closed. So even with their eyes closed, their body is getting a physiological response to what they're doing. So it's going to calm their breathing. They're taking their other senses out of the picture, and they're going to get some of the benefits that they would from going deep into a meditation. So, nervous system is, I think it's a word that we kind of use a lot, but it's basically what's going on the inside, Yeah.
So you already touched on a couple things. What are some, I guess, what would be the next steps for how a player at home could start to incorporate this on their own if they don't have a class or a book or something like that?
Which part? Breathing?
Just
meditating, yoga?
I guess that's a good follow-up. So let's get more specific. Let's talk about yoga and or movement, however you want to classify it, just movement in general. What's something from a movement standpoint that they can do at home that's going to help benefit them?
Yeah, so I think linked in my Twitter, there's an article that we put out on yoga biomechanics for baseball players, and it basically touches on the key points for a baseball player. Twisting is going to be an important motion for pitchers. So, any way that you can find a twist, and you can find a twist standing, seated, lying down. You could hold on to the wall and twist. So there are many ways to just incorporate those little things. If you want to stretch your hamstrings, you could just fold forward, try to touch your toes. You could do that seated. You could do that with your legs up a wall. So there's, lots of different ways. You kind of have to think about the body and the area that you're trying to stretch. You don't need to be on a yoga mat to do yoga. You can do it in bed. You can do, simple stretches to help open up your hips and your back before you even get out of bed. And that just might start your day off just a little bit better, a little bit easier to move. Yeah.
That's good. So what about with breathing? What's something they can do at home with breathing?
Yeah, I think it's just closing your eyes and just breathing. As far as yoga breathing, it's in through the nose, out through the nose, and that helps to also calm your breathing patterns. So that's what we always recommend. And inhaling and then just exhaling, a smooth exhale through your nose. I know Josh talked about it a few weeks ago, but the more you can lengthen the exhale, the better that is to help calm you down. So especially in a stressful or anxiety-ridden situation, if you can think about taking a deep breath in, but even a deeper breath out, that's really important. And as far as meditation goes, it doesn't need to be anything fancy. There's also many different types of meditation. So just like yoga, it's kind of like this big umbrella. You can literally just close your eyes. You don't need to try to think about nothing. You don't need to meditate on a saying. You can, like, there's lots of different ways you can do it, but you could just simply close your eyes and do it for 3 minutes. I meditate every day, but it's not for a long time. And so I used to meditate at a different point in my life, probably, 20 minutes a day, twice a day. That was like the goal when I was going through my meditation training. And it just doesn't really work for me now. So I do what I can. I try to do it twice a day. When I fall out of practice or it just doesn't feel right, I only make myself do it for 3 minutes, and most days I do it for 7, and 7 feels like a good number for me, but, do it for 3. And if you can do it for 3, 5, if 3 minutes feels like forever, you could stay on 3 minutes for a while, so it's just the simple act of doing it and creating the pattern and, getting used to doing that in your body.
Do you remember the very first time you ever meditated, whether it was with yoga or like trying it out randomly? Did you remember that time?
I do. Yeah, the time flew by. So it was my yoga teacher. His name is Eric Schiffman, one of my yoga teachers. And he just had a really simple way of guiding people in and out. And it didn't have to be this big deal, which is what I thought it was at that point. I thought you had to sit up and like do the whole thing. And I think he had us laying down and, breathing together. And then he talked through some stuff. And then before I knew it, like an hour had passed. And I couldn't believe that much time had passed. That's a very long time for a beginner to try to meditate. It was partially guided. But it's really amazing how it makes your body feel. You feel like you've rested, you feel rejuvenated. It's cool.
How can players start to integrate that in like a game setting or a practice setting when things are a lot more fast paced?
Yeah, it's just about finding moments of quiet. Being at the baseball field a lot, especially pre-games, one of my favorite things to do is watch the grounds crew like water the infield. Like, I just think that's like a very calming thing to do. So I recommend that players just go sit in the dugout or find a quiet space to just kind of be there and be in that moment, just for a few moments before the game gets started. And then also, I think it's important after the game as well, whether it's good or bad, to just sit quietly for a couple minutes and let it go. And, you can leave the clubhouse and leave your day behind and get ready for the next day.
I like that. I'm going to check and see if any of our high schoolers have gotten on here. Oops. Because usually they're the ones that are on Instagram. So let's take a 16-year-old, because that's pretty much an average age range that we have on Instagram, and that will probably watch this. So have a 16-year-old, let's say even outside of baseball, because baseball is what they're playing, but their entire life, gets kind of squished into baseball. So there's a lot of things going on. What's something from a breathing standpoint or a meditation standpoint that they could do to try to handle everything else that's going on when they're at home?
Yeah. So I think it's important to create a space, like a quiet space for you, whatever that is. Give yourself like kind of any calming rituals that you like, whatever that may be. And then deep belly breathing is something that I really recommend to do, especially at home and especially before bed. It's really good to do for your body, but just breathing into your hands. So you just bring your hands to your low belly, close your eyes, and just try to breathe into your hands. And you'll start to realize there's different breath exercises that I'll take people through. But when you're just breathing, it tends to be a pretty shallow breath in your chest. And, it really takes some effort. You have to think about taking these deep belly breaths. And that can help you just feel kind of get out of the moment, whatever that is. Just do that for 10 breaths or a couple of minutes and see how you feel afterwards.
No, that's good. I remember being a 16-year-old boy, and there's a lot going on in your mind. And I know when I was talking to Josh on the other episode about the breathing and meditating, I was like, I wish someone would have taught me what any of this was, or even introduced it to me, 15, 20 years ago. It would have been probably helpful. Yeah.
And I hear that from a lot of older baseball players too. It's like seeing just the simple stretches that you can do every day and just the breathing exercises. They had wished that they had started that sooner.
Some of the things that you've said, like just watching the grounds crew work and things like that, are there times that for sure there is yoga or meditation going on the field that you can recognize someone who maybe isn't doing a traditional form, but basically what they're doing, you can see it on TV, or if you're at a ball game, you can look at a guy and be like, hey, he's probably meditating. This is what he's doing. Do you ever recognize that or see people?
Definitely. Yeah, you can see. And like I said in that quote, like baseball is full of, patterns, and like guys tend to do the same thing every day. And then you'll see them kind of have their just little habits. And I think those are little micro meditations, even though they don't really necessarily know it. I mean, they're doing they're taking care of their bat a certain way, or they're doing their glove thing, and it's meticulous, and it's the same thing. So yeah, I mean, they are being really present and mindful and doing something. So I think that is meditation.
Well, that's perfect. I'm trying as best I can to demystify and make it just more understandable and relatable. And like you said, people are already doing it. These are just off the cuff. What's the most extreme example of meditation you've ever seen someone do on a field, or that you've heard of someone doing on a field, where you're like, they just take it to another level, or they do a ton more than I ever imagined a baseball player would do, or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there were stories of like the Barry Zito days. I think he was like kind of the most far out, and now looking back, like he wasn't that far out. Like I think he was just a little bit ahead of his time. But it seemed like the stuff that he did was a little bit extreme. But yeah, I can't think of anything else off the top of my head that I've seen where I know necessarily that they're doing something.
Have you been watching the Jordan documentary?
We're a few episodes behind, but yeah, we've been watching.
Okay, I think we are too. But I'm just talking about Phil Jackson. Had you related with a lot of what he talks about and believes in? Yeah,
I love Phil. I lived in New York for quite a while, and it was like my dream to work with Phil Jackson. I mean, he is just a special guy. But yeah, to be able to share meditation and mindfulness in a really relatable way for the players, just introducing them to it. And you see the videos. I mean, that was like in the 90s, and these guys were still doing it. But meditation works, it sticks for a lot of those guys. A lot of them do the visualization. LeBron's like a huge meditation, yoga, mindfulness guy too. So.
Yeah, it's if you look around, it's like you said, it's everywhere. We watched it just last night, and to see Phil having all the guys, like you said, it's in 1998 or 97, and they're all on the middle of the court, and they're all on their mat, and it's just like, we think it's still somewhat wild now, but it's like, no, it's just been around for decades.
I know, so long. Yeah.
Well, that was interesting. I'm going to transition into some of the research that you're doing, and that probably can help give us a little bit more, or a few more examples. But is there anything else that you would say just in the game that players can either think about or start to practice, or start to change a little bit of the way that they're doing things to incorporate, whether it's yoga, stretching, movement, breathing, or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say try to do something that you can stick to. Like I said, like it doesn't need to be a huge time commitment. It doesn't need to be a big drawn out process. A couple minutes here and there, just sitting quietly by yourself, or even with your teammates if they're interested in doing that. The power of sitting with other people in meditation is a really cool experience, and especially with guys that you play with every single day. If it's something that you're open to, all sit up on the dugout and do it together for a few minutes and get your heads right before the game. As far as stretching, you have to take care of your body. Your strength and conditioning coaches and trainers are hopefully taking really good care of you, but through yoga, you can kind of learn what works for your body. And, one of the things we always say in yoga is like, these are the different variations. These are the different options for the yoga poses. So you can either do this, this, or this. And, the third this isn't always going to be the hardest, or maybe it is the hardest, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you need to strive to do that. One example is like a hamstring stretch with your knee on the ground. It's like that pose is the precursor to doing full splits. You don't need to do the full splits. I prefer to do that half stretch because I can feel it in my hip a little bit more. I can get deeper into the hamstring. So it's like, making good choices as an athlete for the stretches that you're going to be doing. You have a limited time stretching, most likely, especially with the team. If you guys are doing team stretching, it's going to be very limited. But finding your range of motion, which has got to be different for every single person, and then those little tweaks within it to make the pose feel good for you, and breathing as well. So when you're holding your breath, trying to do a yoga pose, I say it in class, but it sends a signal to your brain that you're in danger. Once your body thinks you're in danger, everything just kind of freezes up. So if you're in a stretch that you're not used to doing, what you need to do is breathe, because that sends a signal to your brain that you're safe within that range of motion. And then the next time you try to go to that range, you're going to be okay there. So it's counterintuitive. It's like surprising how much we hold our breath. We hold our breath when we're doing something hard. We hold our breath when you're trying to make a play, but it's like, how can you keep your mind on breathing? Paying attention to the fact that you should be taking slow, deep breaths.
I've never heard it put that way, that it's you breathing lets your body know that, or your mind know that it's safe. I really like that.
Yeah.
And I know when I was doing so I did one of your class, I can't remember if I mentioned that, but I did your class a couple weeks ago, and I hadn't done yoga in a while of any kind. It's been at least a couple of years, but I've, done it a handful of times over the years. And I just felt more stable on my shoulders, because I've been having a lot of shoulder issues with, having a little one now and a lot of rocking. And so my shoulders have been jacked up. I haven't been working out as much. But just going through those movements and having to hold stable poses for long enough, I just felt like I had more stability in my joints. So that was awesome. The one thing I love about yoga, and I want to attribute yoga to my body familiarity, because just growing up, not a lot of people teach you about your body, but I remember through those classes, and you do a really good job with it too, instructors that communicate well, like yourself, are able to pick up, because they know their craft and they know what's going on in the body and understand it well enough to recognize if you're in a downward dog, so, your butt's in the air and your hands are on the ground and your head's down, to just rocking side to side and feeling your hips move, or to be able to stretch out your right calf and shift your hips. So there's these subtle movements that you can make in your body, and you had never thought about them before. And I just feel like, whether it was in lifting or playing football in high school or basketball, whatever it was, I just felt like I was able to understand how my body worked, as opposed to just how the body works, but my body, and realize these little things. So even in your class a couple weeks ago, there was a couple times where I think it was just we were doing just a stretch to the side. So you're trying to measure how much our spine angle was going over to the side. And you had talked about putting more weight, or putting equal weight into both of your feet. And then I had realized, all my weight is on my right foot as I'm balancing to the right. And so then I tried to do both feet with weight in them. And I noticed my hips had to shift, and that completely changed the stretch in my back. Yeah. So those things I just can't highly recommend it enough. And if you want to add anything to that, I would.
Yeah. So we all do that. We all have our own compensation patterns. It's like nobody stands equally on their feet all day, every day. It's like we all have our things. And then because you kind of do this, this hip is going to have a problem, so we have these areas that we're going to have imbalances, and yoga is a great opportunity to kind of bring light to what those imbalances are in our body, and then how to work to just bring a little more symmetry to the body. So, a lot of the stuff that you do is one leg at a time. So it's like, it might be really hard for you to balance on your left leg because you put all of your weight on your right foot constantly. So it's just, it helps to bring the awareness back to make that connection with your body. And, as athletes, I think it helps athletes move better. It can help them prevent injuries. It's like you're paying more attention to the way your body moves. Whereas before I did yoga, I would bend down and pick something up, rounding my spine, blocking out my legs, just like not bending optimally for my body. Now that I do yoga, I when I bend down to pick up anything off the ground, I hinge from my hips. Like I do a totally different reach for it. And because of that, you know, it feels good. It actually feels like a stretch when I do a lot of things, but it doesn't hurt, you know? And so yoga can bring just the awareness to the simple things that we do every single day, to keep us a little more in symmetry.
I'm glad I did that class because it brought me back and kept me back in tune with my body. Let's see. Okay, so getting into some of the research. So I know you guys posted one, at least the article that I saw was back in December, and I remember reading it. And that was actually the first time that I was aware of what you guys were doing and started to follow you. And it kind of crept my head like, hey, I need to at some point reach out to this person and try to connect and kind of see what they're doing. So can you talk about a little bit about, again, just in general, what type of research you're doing, and then we can kind of dive in from there.
Yeah, so we've been doing biomechanics research on range of motion for baseball players. Last summer, we looked at some recovery patterns for pitchers and to see if they could recover quicker with yoga through their 5-day pitching cycle. And we're looking at some different range of motion stuff right now, but mostly recovery based. So we're trying to see, can we use yoga, breathing, mindfulness as a modality to get these players feeling their best and feeling their best a little bit earlier than they normally would.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about, you know, you've got a pitcher who's on a 5-day routine. I'm trying to think how to say this. I know what's going on in my head. What measurements or what movements or what ranges of motion are they losing typically? Because I know there's a lot of research out there. I mean, some of the earliest research that I read when I got into just reading research about the body, and I often quiz guys on, is just flexion of the spine, basically at your hips when you're flexing. And that was one of the things that people were looking at. So it was interesting to read. But what are some of the areas that you're pinpointing in on for ranges of motion that are affected from that 5-day routine?
Yeah, so there's definitely shoulder fatigue, just limited range of motion in the hips as well. Hips, spine, and shoulders is what we looked at. So we were trying to see if we could give them a yoga session the day after they pitch when they're typically very sore. And so that was like a full recovery-based yoga session. So it's like not even hardly anything with arms over the head, more focused on breathing, which, you know, by breathing, you can help to massage the muscles around the shoulders. So you can get some recovery measures there. And then just doing some other stuff that it's all connected, you know, your body's all connected. So doing a stretch here is going to help here. You know, so yeah, we looked at a recovery-based session the day after they pitched, and then 2 days after the session, we gave them a little more strength and stability, what we would call a vinyasa class. Not a typical vinyasa class, because there's lots of modifications for baseball players. But yeah, that's what we were looking at in that study. What
were some of the big findings from those?
Yeah, so I don't have them memorized off the top of my head, but I think like 22 of the 28 range of motion measures were like net positive. So they did recover faster using these yoga poses. There was you can look at the study. It'll be linked on my social media to read more about the specifics about stuff. But yeah, I was surprised to see how well these guys did with the yoga.
And I think you guys compared them to a control group. So was that guys that like had no recovery, or was it the same group on times that they didn't do the recovery? How did you compare them?
It was a separate group, so they didn't participate in the yoga at all.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Was there any positive or negative feedback from those groups?
Yeah, so I mean, the guys that didn't get to do the yoga wanted to be in the recovery session the next day, because those guys were just laying on their back for the most part, just chilling out in practice. I was surprised to see, especially at that age group. It was high school and college guys, but they really wanted to be a part of the yoga and see what it was all about.
And so for the guys that were in the class and got the recovery, did they explain any difference in their feelings? Because you obviously measured things and it was a net positive, but was there any feelings or comments that they had that was like, oh, I feel better, or I'm thinking clearer, or I feel like my shoulder's less sore? Was anything like that?
Yeah, so a few of them were complaining that just the overhead motion was hard to do, and so they said they immediately felt better. One of the guys said that they slept better, which is something that we typically see as a benefit of yoga, anyways. But yeah, it was positive feedback, so it was cool.
Well, that's awesome. Yeah, what type of background did you get on the players? Because this person was asking about, did you ask about their training background, any of their movement or training history or anything like that?
As far as information put into the study, or just information that I used for the yoga that we did?
Yeah, I mean, either. How much information did you grab from those participants that were doing it?
Yeah, so we didn't have too much information on them. Just went in there and took their measurements and started doing yoga with them right away. So I didn't have their backstory. Yeah. They were training at a training facility, so they were doing their standardized training before I came in.
Yeah. What's the short and long-term goal for what you guys are doing with the research?
Yeah. We're just continuing to gather data at this point. It's really cool to see. We've looked at the acute effects, and now we're starting to look at more of the long-term effects. And there haven't really been that many good studies on athletes doing yoga over time, typically because in season guys kind of ditch the program. So we're looking at some stuff there, and through the Zoom classes that I'm teaching now, we're able to, which is the class that you participated in, we're able to do a mobility assessment and then rate people, show their progress pre and post yoga. So we're gathering some really important data points.
Yeah. Yeah, that was going to be one of my questions too, is because some of the research out there that I've seen was very short term. And I even tell guys that there was a study out there, if I'm teaching them just how to use a foam roller, that if it's something that you don't keep up consistently and daily and sometimes multiple times a day, what the study had said, something like as few as 10 minutes after a foam rolling session where you might have gained range of motion, it can go back to the normal range of motion. So yeah, I was curious to see long term, because clearly, I mean, the class and the results that you gave me, my ranges of motions either stayed the same or got better across the board. So yeah, I was curious to see long term. So it'll be really interesting to follow along.
Yeah, we'll be keeping track of that.
Do you have any hypotheses?
I'm a yoga believer, so I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. Yoga works.
I agree. I mean, if for nothing else, taking a class with someone, and we'll get to your classes later, I want to give them a little bit of a plug, but taking a class with someone who communicates well and just get you in tune with your body and being able to pay attention. So whether you get the breathing part from it, the focusing or meditating part of it, or clearing your mind or whatever it is, or just the body awareness, I think that's just super helpful for just so many reasons. I mean, I've had back pain for a really long time in my life, and if it wasn't for some aspects of yoga and understanding how my body works, I feel like I would just been lost completely with trying to handle it. So
yeah, you can take yoga with you, wherever you go at any age point, working through any sort of injury. It's just a matter of figuring out the right way to implement and the modifications that you need to make. But it really is a lifelong practice. And, the range of motion stuff is really incredible, and it's cool to see. And especially for athletes, it's important for them to see, what is their mobility, where are they at? And it doesn't need to be something to obsess over, but I think it's important to see some baseline stuff and where you're going. But the nervous system stuff is the stuff that really interests me, the HRV, and, we're also interested in doing some research along those lines. I'm wearing a Whoop and an Apple Watch, so starting to get some information on how the heart is reacting to all of this yoga. So
yeah, that'll be great. Okay, so this part I meant to prep you, and it's not going to like scare you or anything, but it's a segment or part of the show that I like to call the Twins Critique. So it's where it gives me a chance to let viewers kind of get to know a little bit about our organization. And then because we're always trying to evolve, we want to ask the experts, so yourself, just an area that you would be able to critique. So I'll try to get it specific for you. So what I like to tell everyone is the two major things that our organization focuses on is, number one, communication. So whether it's our 8U teams all the way up to our high school teams and our college guys coming back, we all speak the same language. So it's baseball jargon. There's so much of it out there, and we try to teach the same jargon, the same cues, and the same topics and things for whatever the topic is. so that everyone understands it across the board, because that's a big issue in baseball and a lot of areas of the world. So that's number one, is communication. We even started this year our draft 1.0 version of our coaches certification. So everyone, we sent out videos with tests and everything to get everyone certified across the board. The second thing is to have everything in-house. So we've got pitching, hitting, infielding, catching, outfielding, base running, performance training, mental training, all included for the same price of basically any other equivalent program around, but a 18 to 20 week, depending on the year, off-season program that includes all of that, and it's just in their price. And because we believe if you come to the Indiana Twins, then you should be able to get everything under one roof and not have to go and pick around. So with all of that said, and I know you don't know everything in the ins and outs of what we do, but from a either breathing, movement, or meditation standpoint, or mental training standpoint, what is an area that you would advise us to really dive into more or do less of, because you see it as an issue? And I'm filibustering to give you time to think about this, to give you that you see others do too much of, and maybe it's not worth their time because we're all limited on time. But what area of critique or additions would you add?
Yeah, I think a great addition across the board would just be the breathing together thing. Like I said, it doesn't need to be a long time. 3 minutes where you get together, every single group gets together and they sit quietly and they breathe together, and that's all you need to do. I taught at a yoga and mindfulness at a charter school in Harlem, and it was kindergarten all the way up. And that's something that we implemented, and we had to kind of cater it to the different age ranges to a certain degree. But the idea was everybody knows that we're going to have a couple of minutes of quiet time together. And so it's like, getting your heads right, getting your mind clear before you go into a meeting, a game, a situation. Like, as a group, you can communicate better. You can respect each other more. You can just all be together in the same space better if you're all on the same page, and you can get that way, without just coming in ready to go, that's great. And it's important to have that energy in those situations, but get together as a group first. And a simple way is just close your eyes and be in the same space for a few minutes.
Yep. Is there an example that you could give us, like even a 30-second thing that you could take me through that maybe we could use in the future or something?
Sure. Yeah.
All right. Well, I am your student.
All right. Cool. All right. So go ahead and just get comfortable in your chair just as best as you can. Yeah. You can kind of sit back, just let your shoulders slide down a little bit more. Close your eyes. Good. And just start to take some deep breaths here. So just becoming aware of your body in space. So you're feeling the support of the chair underneath you, and the support of the ground underneath your feet. And knowing that that's there. You're in a quiet, safe space. Just taking some slow, deep breaths in through your nose and then out through your nose. And then as you're breathing here, is there a way that you can relax the area around your eyes even more? So your eyes are closed, but can you just keep them lightly closed? So there's no light getting in, but there's no strain closing your eyes. So we don't really think about it, but when we have our eyes closed, sometimes we're kind of closing them hard. That takes some energy. Just kind of let that go. Let your eyes be softly closed. And just maybe start to lengthen out your breath a little bit. See if you can relax your jaw. So you can even slightly part your lips just a little bit here. Release your jaw. So everything in your face is soft. And then check in with your shoulders again. Can you let them relax down just a little bit more? And just continue breathing like that. And you could do that for a couple of minutes, but even just sitting here breathing like this for about a minute or so just really brings you down and feels good, hopefully.
Feels very good. Yeah, the amount of awareness of what's going on in my body, I can, sometimes I get excited for these interviews and or these shows, and I should do that beforehand every time.
Right. Yeah, I think the thing that I like is just like the little reminders. It's like, even when we have our eyes closed, almost everyone can relax your eyes just a little bit more if you pay attention to that area. Yep. You know, and you see it throughout yoga, kind of like the cool down part of it. But it's like you'll just kind of see people just holding a little bit of tension and like tell them it's okay to release that, and then holy cow, like they're starting to relax even more. So yeah, little tiny tweaks.
That was fantastic. Thank you. All right, so I want to double check just to make sure there's nothing pressing here anywhere, and then I want to give you an opportunity to kind of tell everyone about where they can find you. So let me make sure there's nothing else in my notes. Yeah, so like I said, I took one of your classes and I really, really enjoyed it. And I got to do some range of motion things too, but I know that's not your normal class. But if you could tell everyone where to find you, where to find more about you. I also want to hear a little bit, if you want to mix it in there, about where you came up with Yoga 42, and then just some of your classes and what you offer.
Yeah, so I guess first I came up with Yoga 42 to honor Jackie Robinson. Jackie Robinson is the reason that I have been in and around the game for so long. And, you know, we've all heard her story. We've probably all watched the movie 42, but unless you've, you know, really read some books and done some additional research on Jackie as a person, you know, I think that movie doesn't even really do justice to the person that Jackie was. I mean, everybody kind of uses the word integrity as almost a buzzword, just, you know, something we all strive to have, integrity. But Jackie's integrity was different than what we consider integrity today. I mean, the stuff that he endured to make it possible for the future generations. He was able to see in the moment, tremendously present, that what he was doing was important for everybody else, not just himself. You know, and there were many opportunities for him to fight back and for him to fight back with cause. You know, like he was treated very poorly for a very long time. And I think those stories kind of gloss over it as well. Really how terrible it was for him to get started. And he never fought back. He never, you know, did the things that a lot of people wouldn't think twice about doing. So, you know, Jackie's integrity is just, it's up there. So I named my yoga business after Jackie. I have a baby boy, a 16-month-old today, and I named him Jack to honor Jackie Robinson as well. So living in New York, I did some work with the Jackie Robinson Foundation, and I had the absolute pleasure and honor of meeting and interacting with his wife quite a bit. So I taught yoga and mindfulness for the Jackie Robinson Foundation for several years, and got to spend some time with Rachel and talk to her and tell her how much Jackie meant to me. And that was really an important moment in my life because, you know, without Jackie, like I wouldn't even be here. So that's why I have Yoga 42. You can find me at yoga42.com is my website. Steph Armijo is my handle on everything. Last name Armijo. Teaching some Zoom yoga classes for baseball players during the week, Tuesdays and Fridays. And then Saturday, we are doing yoga for athletes with a biomechanical assessment. So you can sign up for that. It's at 11:30 on Saturdays. Teaching tomorrow, if anyone wants to jump in, the registration's still open. So it's going to be appropriate for all levels. Definitely a good way to start out yoga if you've never done any yoga, and also get some interesting mobility data that you can compare to at a later date if you want to. So yeah, but feel free, anyone can shoot me an email if you want to talk yoga or baseball. It's just Steph@yoga42.com. Baseball and yoga are my two true loves. So yeah, I love talking about them.
Well, I can't highly recommend her class enough. Like I said, I took it, and I'm sure there are, just like there are in any industry, instructors and teachers that don't teach well, but Steph is not one of those. Like I said, the small little details and the modifications that she makes for, like you said, any level, just highly recommend it. So check that out if you're interested. Thank you, Steph. Thank you for everyone for tuning in, and we will be back. What is today? Friday. So we will be back next week. So hopefully everyone tunes in, and we will talk to you then.